Welcome, dear listener, to a peaceful journey through time. As you settle into the comfort of your warm bed, with soft pillows cradling your head and gentle moonlight filtering through your window, let your mind drift backward through the centuries. Tonight, we shall explore the daily rhythms of life in a time long past, the medieval period, an era that stretched from the 5th to the 15th century. Picture, if you will, a landscape dotted with stone castles rising majestically against rolling hills, their towers reaching toward cloudy skies. Imagine villages with thatched roof cottages nestled in green valleys, thin wisps of smoke curling from their chimneys. See the people in their simple woolen garments, nobles in their fine fabrics, peasants in their humble attire, and monks in their brown robes walking quietly along dusty paths. This was a world where life moved to the rhythm of the seasons, where the sun determined when to wake and when to sleep, and where communities were bound together by shared hardships and simple joys. Though life was challenging in ways we can scarcely imagine today, it was also filled with human warmth, community spirit, and quiet moments of beauty that sustained the human heart. The dawn of a medieval day. Let us begin our journey by following a peasant woman named Marta as she awakens in her small cottage. The year is 1325, and winter is slowly giving way to spring in the English countryside. Marta's home is modest, a single room shared with her husband Godwin, their 3 children, and sometimes their aging cow, Bessie. During the coldest nights, the walls of their cottage are built from wattle and daub, a framework of woven branches plastered with a mixture of clay, straw, and dried dung. This mixture, while humble, provides surprising insulation against the cold winds that sweep across the fields. The roof is thatched with straw, carefully layered to shed rain and snow. A small hole in the center allows smoke from their hearth to escape into the gray dawn sky. Marta stirs as the first cock crows in the village. There are no clocks in her world. Time is measured by the sun's journey across the sky, the church bells that mark the hours of prayer, and the natural rhythms of animals and seasons. She rises from her straw mattress, covered with rough woolen blankets that she has woven herself during the long winter evenings. The cottage is still dim in the early light. The windows are mere openings in the walls, covered with wooden shutters that keep out wind and rain but also much of the light. Marta pushes open one shutter, breathing in the crisp morning air that carries the scent of damp earth and new grass. Her first task is to stoke the fire in the central hearth. The embers from the previous night still glow faintly, and she carefully adds dried twigs and then larger pieces of wood. Fire is precious in Marta's world. It provides warmth, light, and the means to cook food. Keeping it alive through the night is a skill passed down through generations. As the flames grow stronger, casting dancing shadows on the walls, Marta begins to prepare the morning meal. Breakfast is a simple affair. Dark bread made from barley and rye, perhaps a bit of cheese if they are fortunate, and weak ale. The ale is not for pleasure, but for safety. The water from the village well is often cloudy and sometimes makes people ill, while the brewing process makes ale safer to drink. The village awakens as Marta tends to her morning tasks. The village around her slowly comes to life. The cottage next door houses Thomas the miller and his family. Thomas has already been awake for an hour, checking the great wooden wheel that turns his millstone. The sound of grinding grain will soon fill the morning air as villagers bring their barley and wheat to be ground into flour. Across the narrow dirt path lives Elena, a widow who supports herself and her young son by tending the herb garden behind the village church. Elena knows which plants can soothe a fever, which can help with pain, and which can aid digestion. In a world without physicians, such knowledge is invaluable, and Elena is respected throughout the village for her healing skills. At the far end of the village stands the manor house of Lord William de Montfort, a stone building much larger than the peasant cottages. Lord William has responsibilities that extend far beyond his own comfort. He must ensure the village is protected from brigands, settle disputes among the villagers, and collect the taxes owed to the king. His lady wife, Margaret, oversees the manor's household, ensuring that bread is baked, ale is brewed, and the great hall is ready to welcome travelers and guests. The village church, dedicated to St. Bartholomew, sits at the heart of the community. Father Benedict, a kindly man in his middle years, has already said his morning prayers and is preparing for the day ahead. The church serves not only as a place of worship, but as the center of village life. It is where announcements are made, disputes are sometimes settled, and the community gathers for festivals and celebrations. Marta's daily labor after breaking her fast. Marta wraps her woolen cloak around her shoulders and steps outside. The dirt paths of the village are muddy from recent spring rains, and she lifts her long skirt carefully as she walks. Her wooden clogs, carved by her husband during the winter months, keep her feet dry and protected. Marta's day, like that of most peasant women, will be filled with a variety of tasks. First, she must tend to their small vegetable garden behind the cottage. Here she grows onions, leeks, cabbages, and beans, vegetables that will help sustain the family through the coming year. She pulls weeds with her hands, waters the young plants with a wooden bucket, and checks for signs of pests or disease. The work is methodical and peaceful. As Marta kneels in the soft earth, she can hear the sounds of the village around her. Children playing with simple wooden toys, dogs barking at passing travelers, the rhythmic thud of Thomas's mill wheel, and the gentle lowing of cattle in the common pasture. After tending the garden, Marta returns to the cottage to begin spinning wool into thread. This is work that continues throughout much of the year. The family sheep provide wool that must be cleaned, combed, spun, and then woven into cloth for clothing and blankets. Marta sits by the window, her spinning wheel turning steadily as she draws out long strands of thread. The motion is soothing, almost meditative, and she often hums old songs her mother taught her while she works. The children's world. Marta and Godwin's 3 children: young Edmund, age 10, Mary, age 8, and little Alice, barely 4, live in a world quite different from childhood today. By age 7, children are expected to contribute meaningfully to the family's survival, though they still find time for play and wonder. Edmund spends his mornings helping his father in the fields. Today, they are preparing the soil for planting barley, using a simple wooden plow pulled by their ox, Brownie. Brownie is a gentle giant, patient with Edmund's inexperienced hands on the guiding ropes. The boy's face glows with pride when his father nods approvingly at a straight furrow. Edmund dreams sometimes of becoming a craftsman like Master Geoffrey, the village carpenter. He loves the smell of fresh wood shavings and the sight of Geoffrey's skilled hands shaping boards into useful objects, stools, tables, wooden bowls, and tool handles. But Edmund knows that his future likely lies in the fields, following in his father's footsteps as most children do. Mary helps her mother with household tasks, but also has time to play with her corn husk, and to gather wildflowers from the meadows. She has learned to identify many plants from Elena, the herb woman, sweet violets that can be made into syrup, dandelion greens that taste good in springtime, and chamomile flowers that make a soothing tea. Little Alice spends her days close to her mother's side, learning by watching and imitating. She has her own small spindle and practices making thread from scraps of wool, though her attempts are more play than productive work. She delights in feeding the chickens their scattered grain and in collecting their warm eggs from the nesting boxes. The rhythm of seasons life in Marta's village follows the ancient rhythm of the seasons with a regularity that brings both security and challenge. Spring is a time of hope and renewal, when the fields must be prepared and planted. The weather can be unpredictable. Late frosts can kill tender shoots, while too much rain can rot seeds in the ground. But there is joy in watching the first green shoots emerge from the dark soil, and in seeing the apple trees in the manor's orchard burst into white blossoms. Summer brings long days of labor under the warm sun. The hay must be cut, dried, and stored for winter fodder. Gardens require constant tending, weeding, watering, and protecting from pests. This is also the season for making repairs to cottages, mending thatched roofs, and patching walls where winter weather has taken its toll. The summer air is filled with the buzzing of bees that make honey in hollow trees and in the manor's carefully tended hives. Children help by gathering berries, sweet strawberries, tart blackberries, and precious blueberries that can be dried for winter use. These small luxuries add sweetness to an otherwise plain diet. Autumn is perhaps the most critical season, for it determines whether the village will eat well through the winter or face hunger. The grain harvest requires every able person to work from dawn to dusk. The golden fields of barley and rye must be cut with sickles, gathered into sheaves, and threshed to separate the precious grain from the stalks. This is also the season for slaughtering some of the livestock that cannot be fed through winter. The meat is carefully preserved by salting or smoking, providing protein during the lean months ahead. Nothing is wasted. Bones are saved for soup, hides are tanned for leather, and even the fat is rendered for candles and cooking. The long winter nights. Winter in Marta's world is a time of both rest and preparation. With the fields dormant under snow, there is less outdoor work to be done, but the long evenings are filled with indoor tasks. By the light of tallow candles or the flickering hearth fire, Marta spins wool, weaves cloth, and mends clothing that must last for years. Godwin spends winter evenings carving wooden tools and toys, or repairing leather goods with needles made from bone. The cottage becomes a workshop where the family creates many of the items they need for daily life. Edmund learns to whittle whistles and simple bowls, while Mary practices her stitching on scraps of cloth. These winter evenings are also times for storytelling. Godwin tells old tales passed down through generations, stories of brave knights and clever peasants, of magical creatures living in the deep forest, and of saints who performed miraculous deeds. The children listen with wide eyes, the stories becoming part of their understanding of the world beyond their village. Sometimes neighbors gather in one cottage or another, sharing warmth, food, and companionship. They might play simple games with wooden pieces or listen to Robert the Bard, who travels from village to village with his lute and his repertoire of songs and stories. Music and poetry provide beauty and escape in a world where such pleasures are rare and precious. The manor house, while Marta and her family live their simple life in their one-room cottage. Lord William and Lady Margaret inhabit a different world, though it shares many of the same challenges. Their manor house, built of stone with thick walls and narrow windows, is designed as much for defense as for comfort. The great hall is the heart of the manor, a large room with a high ceiling and a massive fireplace. Here Lord William holds court, settling disputes between villagers and hearing requests for aid or favor. Long wooden tables fill the hall during mealtimes, when members of the household and important visitors share meals together. Lady Margaret's days are filled with the complex task of managing a large household. She oversees the work of numerous servants, cooks who prepare meals in the manor's kitchens, maids who clean and maintain the many rooms, and seamstresses who create and repair clothing for the family and their retainers. The manor has its own chapel, where Father Benedict sometimes says special masses for the Lord's family. The walls are decorated with painted scenes from the Bible, bringing color and beauty to the stone interior. Tapestries woven with intricate designs hang on the walls, providing both decoration and insulation against the cold. Lord William's responsibilities extend far beyond his manor. He owes allegiance to a higher lord, who in turn owes service to the king. This fuel system creates a complex web of obligations and loyalties that can sometimes lead to conflict. When called upon, Lord William must provide armed men for his lord's service, and he must be prepared to defend his own lands against raiders or rival lords. The church and faith religion permeates every aspect of life in Marta's world. The day begins and ends with prayers, meals are blessed, and work is undertaken with the understanding that all labor is service to God. The church calendar provides structure to the year, with feast days and holy days marking the passage of time and providing occasions for rest and celebration. Father Benedict is more than a spiritual guide. He is also one of the few educated people in the village. He can read and write, skills that make him invaluable for keeping records, writing letters, and teaching the basics of reading to a few select children. His small collection of handwritten books is treasured, containing not only religious texts, but also practical knowledge about farming, healing, and law. Sunday is the day of rest, when work in the fields ceases and the entire village gathers for Mass. The church service is conducted in Latin, which most villagers do not understand, but the ritual and ceremony provide comfort and continuity. The church is often the most beautiful building in the village, with its stone walls, colored glass windows, and painted decorations telling biblical stories to those who cannot read. Religious festivals provide the main celebrations of the year. Christmas brings feasting and gift-giving, though the gifts are simple. Perhaps a carved wooden toy for a child or a new woolen cap for an adult. Easter marks the end of the Lenten fast with special foods and spring flowers. The feast of the village's patron saint, Saint Bartholomew, is celebrated with music, dancing, and a special meal shared by all. The merchants visit twice a year. The village receives visits from traveling merchants who bring goods from distant places and news from the outside world. Master Pietro, an Italian trader, arrives in late spring with his pack train of mules loaded with precious cargo, silk cloth from the East, spices that transform simple food into feast dishes, and small luxury items that seem magical to village eyes. Pietro sets up his wares in the manor's courtyard, spreading colorful cloths on wooden tables to display his goods. Lord William and Lady Margaret examine fine fabrics and jewelry, while the villagers marvel at items they have never seen before. Mirrors made of polished metal, combs carved from ivory, and small glass bottles containing exotic perfumes. Even the humblest villagers might purchase something from Pietro's stock: a small brass bell for the church, needles made from steel that is sharper and stronger than their bone equivalents, or a piece of colored ribbon that can transform a simple dress into something special for feast days. Pietro also brings news from the wider world, stories of great battles fought in distant lands, descriptions of magnificent cities with stone buildings rising several stories high, and tales of sea voyages to lands where spices grow wild and gold can be found in riverbeds. These stories expand the villagers' understanding of the world beyond their fields and forests. In exchange for his goods, Pietro accepts not only silver coins, but also local products: wool cloth woven by village women, cheese made from the milk of village cows, and honey from the manor's hives. This trade connects Marta's small village to a vast network of commerce that stretches across continents. The craftsman's quarter at the edge of the village, where the main road leads toward the market town. Several craftsmen have established their workshops. Master Geoffrey, the carpenter, works with seasoned oak and ash, creating everything from simple farm tools to elaborate chests for the manor house. His workshop smells of fresh wood shavings and linseed oil, and the sound of his planes shaping smooth boards provides a steady background rhythm to village life. Geoffrey's apprentice, a boy named Simon from a neighboring village, lives and works with the carpenter's family. Simon is learning not only the technical skills of woodworking, but also the business of craftsmanship: how to select good timber, how to price his work fairly, and how to deal with customers who want more work done than they can afford to pay for. Next to the carpenter's shop stands the forge of Harold the blacksmith. Harold's work is essential to the village's survival. He makes and repairs the iron tools that farmers depend on, shoes the horses and oxen, and creates the nails and hinges needed for construction. The forge glows red-hot throughout much of the day, and the ringing of Harold's hammer on his anvil can be heard throughout the village. Harold's wife, Beatrice, helps in the forge but also works as a seamstress, creating clothing for those villagers who cannot make their own or who need garments for special occasions. Her needle is as skillful as her husband's hammer, and she takes pride in her precise stitching and careful attention to fit and comfort. The miller's family, Thomas. The miller occupies a unique position in the village community. His mill, powered by the stream that flows past the village, is essential for turning grain into flour. All villagers are required by custom and law to bring their grain to Thomas rather than grinding it themselves, and in return, he keeps a portion of the flour as payment for his service. The mill itself is a marvel of medieval engineering. The great wooden wheel, turned by the flowing water, connects through a series of gears to the massive millstones that grind the grain. Thomas must understand not only how to maintain this complex machinery, but also how to adjust it for different types of grain and different degrees of fineness. Thomas's wife, Joan, manages the mill's household and also keeps careful records of who has brought grain to be ground and what payment is owed. Her ability to calculate and keep accurate accounts makes her an important figure in the village's economic life. Their son, Stephen, is learning the miller's trade, but he sometimes dreams of a different life. The mill receives visitors from many villages, and Stephen hears stories of life in great cities, of universities where young men learn to read Latin and study philosophy, and of opportunities for advancement beyond the bounds of village life. The herb woman's wisdom. Elena, the herb woman, lives alone in her cottage at the edge of the village, near the forest where she gathers many of her medicinal plants. Her garden is unlike any other in the village. Instead of vegetables and grain, she grows herbs for healing, lavender for headaches, mint for stomach troubles, chamomile for sleeplessness, and dozens of other plants whose uses she learned from her mother and grandmother. Elena's role in the village is both respected and slightly feared. Her knowledge of plants extends to those that can harm as well as heal, and some villagers whisper that her abilities border on magic. But when children fall ill with fever, when women struggle in childbirth, or when men are injured in accidents, Elena is the one they call upon for help. Her cottage is filled with bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, clay pots containing ointments and tinctures, and stones and roots whose properties are known only to her. She can set broken bones, treat infected wounds, and brew potions that ease pain and promote healing. Elena also serves as midwife for the village, assisting women in childbirth with skills passed down through generations of women. She knows the prayers and rituals that are believed to ensure safe delivery, and her presence provides comfort and confidence to expectant mothers. The traveling minstrel, several times a year, the village is visited by wandering minstrels who bring music, poetry, and news from the wider world. Robert the Bard is particularly welcome in Marta's village, for his songs are beautiful and his stories entertaining. He carries a lute made by a master craftsman in a distant city, its wooden body polished to a golden sheen and its strings producing clear, sweet notes. Robert's repertoire includes ballads of courtly love, tales of heroic knights and their adventures, religious songs that teach moral lessons, and humorous stories that make even the most serious villagers laugh. He adapts his performances to his audience, telling simple tales for children and more sophisticated stories for adults. When Robert visits, the entire village gathers in the manor's great hall or, in good weather, in the churchyard. The evening becomes a celebration, with villagers sharing food and drink while they listen to songs and stories that transport them beyond their daily concerns. These performances provide not only entertainment, but also a sense of connection to the broader world of culture and learning. Robert also serves as a messenger, carrying news between villages and sometimes delivering letters for those who cannot write. His travels give him knowledge of events in distant places, and villagers eagerly listen to his accounts of battles, political changes, and natural disasters that affect the wider kingdom. The monastery connection. A day's walk from the village stands the Abbey of St. Augustine, where a community of monks dedicates their lives to prayer, learning, and service to God. The monastery maintains connections with Marta's village through trade, charity, and spiritual guidance. Brother Francis, the Abbey's librarian, sometimes visits the village to consult with Father Benedict about theological questions or to borrow books. The monastery's library contains not only religious texts but also works on medicine, agriculture, and natural philosophy, knowledge that can benefit the entire region. The monks are skilled in many crafts, and they produce goods that they trade with surrounding communities. They make excellent ale, brew herbal medicines, and copy books by hand with beautiful illustrations. Their scriptorium is a quiet place where monks spend hours carefully copying manuscripts, preserving knowledge that might otherwise be lost. The abbey also serves as a place of refuge for travelers and pilgrims. Its guest house provides food and shelter to those in need, and its infirmary offers medical care using the monks' extensive knowledge of herbal medicine. Several young men from Marta's village have entered the monastery as novices, choosing a life of religious devotion over the challenges of village life. The seasonal festivals throughout the year. The rhythm of village life is punctuated by festivals and celebrations that bring the community together and provide relief from daily labor. These gatherings strengthen social bonds and preserve traditions that connect the present generation with their ancestors. The harvest festival in autumn is perhaps the most important celebration of the year. After the grain has been safely gathered and stored, the village holds a great feast in the churchyard. Tables groan under the weight of bread, cheese, roasted meat, and the season's last fresh fruits. Ale flows freely, and even the strictest parents allow their children to stay up late, dancing to the music of pipes and drums. May Day brings a celebration of spring's return, with young people dancing around a tall pole decorated with ribbons and flowers. The day begins with the gathering of fresh flowers and green branches to decorate homes and the church. There are contests of skill and strength, archery competitions for the men, foot races for the young people, and displays of fine needlework by the women. Christmas combines religious observance with ancient traditions of light and feasting during the darkest time of the year. The church holds special services, and every home displays holly and ivy to symbolize life persisting through winter. Families exchange small gifts, and the manor house opens its doors for a feast that brings together all members of the community. The village market. Day once a month, the village transforms into a bustling marketplace when farmers and craftsmen from the surrounding area gather to trade their goods. The manor's courtyard fills with temporary stalls, and the air buzzes with the sounds of bargaining and conversation. Marta looks forward to market day for many reasons. It provides an opportunity to sell eggs from her chickens and vegetables from her garden, earning a few silver coins that can be used to purchase goods her family cannot make for themselves. She might buy iron needles from Harold the blacksmith, or trade some of her wool for a clay pot made by the potter from a neighboring village. Market day is also a social occasion, when Marta can catch up with friends and relatives from nearby settlements. She learns news about weddings and births, hears gossip about the doings of local nobles, and sometimes receives letters carried by travelers from family members who have moved to distant places. The children especially enjoy market day, marveling at the variety of goods on display and begging for small treats like honey cakes or carved wooden toys. They listen wide-eyed to the stories told by merchants and travelers, learning about the world beyond their familiar fields and forests. The challenge of weather in Marta's world. Weather is not merely an inconvenience, but a force that can determine the difference between prosperity and starvation. The family has no weather forecast to help them plan, only traditional signs and the wisdom passed down through generations of farmers. Spring brings the anxiety of late frosts that can kill tender shoots, and too much rain that can rot seeds in the ground before they sprout. Marta watches the sky constantly during planting season, learning to read the subtle signs that predict changes in the weather. A ring around the moon might mean rain is coming, while certain patterns of clouds can signal fair weather ahead. Summer droughts are equally threatening, withering crops in the fields and reducing yields to dangerous levels. The village well must be carefully managed during dry spells, with water rationed for drinking and cooking while crops go unwatered. Everyone prays for the gentle rains that make gardens green and keep streams flowing to power. Thomas's mild autumn storms can flatten fields of grain just before harvest, destroying months of work in a few hours. The entire village watches nervously as clouds gather, knowing that their winter survival depends on bringing in the harvest safely. When storms threaten, every able person rushes to the fields to cut and gather grain before the weather turns violent. Winter presents its own challenges, with heavy snows that can isolate the village for weeks at a time. Families must have enough food stored to last through periods when no fresh supplies are available, and enough firewood to keep their hearths burning through the coldest months. The art of storytelling. As evening settles over the village and families gather around their hearth fires, the ancient art of storytelling comes alive. These stories serve many purposes. They entertain during long winter nights, preserve important cultural values, and provide a form of education for children who will never learn to read. Godwin is known throughout the village as a skilled storyteller, and neighbors often gather in his cottage to hear his tales. He knows stories of brave peasants who outwit cruel lords, of clever women who solve difficult problems through wit rather than strength, and of ordinary people who perform extraordinary deeds when circumstances demand courage. Some stories carry practical wisdom disguised as entertainment. Tales of characters who ignore the signs of changing weather teach children to observe nature carefully. Stories of cooperation and sharing reinforce the values that allow village communities to survive difficult times. Religious stories help villagers understand their place in God's creation and provide comfort during times of suffering. Tales of saints who endured hardship with patience and faith offer models for dealing with the challenges of medieval life. The stories also preserve historical memory, keeping alive the accounts of local events and the deeds of ancestors. Through these tales, the current generation remains connected to those who came before, understanding that they are part of a continuing story that stretches back through generations. The wisdom of seasons, living so closely connected to the natural world. The people of Marta's village develop an intimate understanding of seasonal rhythms that guides their daily decisions. This knowledge, accumulated over generations, helps them survive and even prosper despite the challenges they face. In spring, they know which plants emerge first from the thawing ground and can provide fresh food after the long winter. They understand when soil is ready for planting, not too wet for melting snow, not too cold to nurture seeds. They watch for the return of migrating birds, whose arrival signals that the growing season has truly begun. Summer brings its own lessons about the balance between work and rest. The longest days allow extended hours of labor, but the wise farmer also knows when to seek shade during the hottest part of the day. They learn to read the signs of drought or excessive moisture, adjusting their care of crops accordingly. Autumn requires the most careful judgment, balancing the desire to let crops ripen fully against the risk of early frost or storms. The timing of harvest can determine whether the village eats well through winter or faces hunger before spring arrives. Winter teaches patience and preparation. The successful villager learns to estimate carefully how much food will be needed to last until the next harvest, how much firewood must be cut and stored, and how to maintain tools and equipment during the months when outdoor work is limited. The bonds of community, perhaps? The greatest strength of village life in Marta's time is the web of mutual dependence that binds neighbors together. In a world without government assistance, insurance, or formal social services, people rely on each other for survival and support. When Harold the blacksmith injures his hand and cannot work, other villagers bring food to his family and help with tasks he cannot perform. When Thomas the miller's wheel breaks during the busy harvest season, every man in the village contributes labor to make repairs quickly. When Elena the herb woman falls ill, the women of the village take turns caring for her and maintaining her garden. These bonds extend beyond practical assistance to emotional support. When young mothers struggle with difficult childbirths, experienced women gather to offer help and encouragement. When elderly villagers can no longer care for themselves fully, they find places in the households of younger relatives or neighbors. The community also shares in celebrations and sorrows. Weddings become village-wide festivities, with everyone contributing food, labor, or entertainment. Funerals bring the entire community together to comfort the grieving family and ensure that the deceased is properly honored and remembered. This interdependence creates a social fabric that is both supporting and constraining. While villagers can count on help in times of need, they are also expected to contribute to the welfare of others and to conform to community standards of behavior. The role of women in Marta's world occupy a complex position, with responsibilities that are both limited and essential. While they cannot hold positions of formal authority, their work is crucial to family and community survival. Marta's daily routine demonstrates the diverse skills required of medieval women. She must know how to grow, preserve, and prepare food, how to create clothing from raw wool or flax, how to manage household resources efficiently, and how to care for children, elderly relatives, and sick family members. Women like Elena the herb woman possess specialized knowledge that makes them invaluable to their communities. Midwives help bring new life into the world, while other women develop expertise in healing, food preparation, or textile production that benefits everyone around them. The seasonal cycle brings different demands on women's time and energy. Spring requires planting and tending gardens. Summer brings the intensive work of food preservation. Autumn demands participation in harvest activities. And winter provides time for textile production and household maintenance. Despite the limitations placed on them by law and custom, women find ways to exercise influence and authority within their sphere. They form networks of mutual support, passing knowledge from mother to daughter and creating bonds that strengthen community. Resilience. The children's education in Marta's village takes forms very different from formal schooling. Children learn through observation, imitation, and gradual participation in adult activities. By the time they reach adolescence, most young people possess the skills they need to contribute meaningfully to family and community life. Young Edmund learns farming techniques by working alongside his father, gradually taking on more responsibility as his skills develop. He learns to judge when soil is ready for planting, how to guide the plow in straight furrows, and how to recognize signs of disease or pest damage in growing crops. Mary acquires domestic skills through constant observation of her mother's work. She learns to spin wool by practicing with scraps and broken thread, advancing gradually to work with better materials. She discovers which plants are useful for cooking or medicine by accompanying Elena on her gathering expeditions. Even little Alice absorbs lessons appropriate to her age, learning to identify different plants and animals, to help with simple household tasks, and to understand the rhythms of daily life that will structure her entire existence. The children also receive informal education through the stories told by adults, the songs sung during work, and the customs observed during festivals and religious celebrations. This cultural education helps them understand their place in the community and their responsibilities to others. The monastery school for a very few children in the region. A different type of education is available at the nearby Abbey of St. Augustine. The monks maintain a small school where selected boys can learn to read and write Latin, study arithmetic and geometry, and explore the theological and philosophical works preserved in the monastery's library. Young William, the second son of Lord William de Montfort, attends this school, along with 2 other boys from noble families and one clever peasant child whose ability impressed Father Benedict. The monastery school offers these boys opportunities that are unavailable to their contemporaries, but it also demands sacrifices. The school day begins before dawn with prayers and continues with intensive study until evening. The boys learn Latin by copying passages from religious texts, practice arithmetic by calculating the monastery's accounts, and study geometry through the design of church architecture. Brother Marcus, who serves as schoolmaster, is patient but demanding. He expects his students to memorize long passages from Scripture, to write with clear, careful handwriting, and to engage in logical discussions about theological questions. For most of these boys, education at the monastery school is preparation for careers in the church or in service to great lords, who need educated administrators. Only rarely does a peasant child receive such education, and then usually because he shows exceptional promise and the community has pooled resources to support his studies. The trading network, although Marta's village seems isolated, it is actually connected to an extensive network of trade and communication that stretches across Europe and beyond. The goods that Master Pietro brings on his trading expeditions represent only the visible tip of a complex commercial system. The wool that Marta spins and weaves may eventually be carried to markets in distant cities, where it will be made into fine clothing for merchants or nobles. The grain ground at Thomas's mill might feed not only local families, but also travelers, soldiers, and urban populations who depend on rural production. In exchange, the village receives goods it cannot produce locally: iron tools from regions where ore is mined and smelted, salt from coastal areas where seawater is evaporated, and exotic items like spices and silk from lands across the sea. This trade network also carries information and ideas. The merchants who bring goods to the village also bring news of events in distant places, knowledge of new techniques and technologies, and stories that expand the village's understanding of the wider world. Father Benedict sometimes receives letters from other monasteries, sharing theological discussions and news of religious developments. These connections help maintain intellectual life, even in remote rural areas. The nobles' responsibilities. Lord William de Montfort, though he lives in greater comfort than his peasant neighbors, carries responsibilities that create their own burdens and constraints. As the local representative of royal authority, he must maintain order, collect taxes, and provide military service when called upon by his overlord. His great hall serves as a court where disputes are settled and justice is administered. Villagers bring their quarrels to him for resolution: disagreements about property boundaries, accusations of theft, conflicts between neighbors that cannot be resolved through informal means.